Welcome to the Simply Real Life podcast. I'm Sarah, the founder of Simply Real Health, here to help you simplify, amplify, and elevate your life. This show is for those of you who want the real talk on how to live a more intuitive and intentional life, a life that's healthy from the inside out, and one that feels more effortless, aligned, simple, and more alive. We cover it all, from health, wellness, mindset, motherhood, daily habits and rituals, to business and relationships, creativity and growth, and tiny tricks to feeling your best, and the energetics behind it all filled with personal stories, unfiltered conversations, and of course, answering all of your burning questions, all in the way of simplicity and keeping it real, so that you can create your own version of your healthiest life. Let's do it. Hi, and welcome back, you guys. I wanted to just say thank you really quick for all of your feedback and the love and the ratings and the reviews and just the questions that are coming in to my DMs and just the messages that I'm getting. It's just confirming how right this is all feeling. Just to be able to have the space to talk about these things in more detail and more depth and just sharing these little tiny things that I guess would be impossible to share other places. So thank you so much. I really do appreciate it and take all of your feedback so seriously and just really do want to create this together. So today we have a fun topic, and it's actually based on a question that I get a lot. Is like, do you ever have bad days? Do you ever have days where you're down or discouraged or in a funk? It seems like you're always happy. And the answer is yes. Of course, I do. I do. I'm a human. I am a woman. I am a deep feeler. I have emotions about so many different things. There's so much I think that I feel, maybe more so than other people. And I think at this point, I have a lot of ways and tools that I help myself work through it. So it's not something that necessarily takes over my entire day or takes over an entire week, but it's sort of this active and very engaged process that I have with myself. If I feel something coming on, ways that I sort of help myself process through it, release it, kind of come back to myself, whether it's some kind of funk or it's something outside of my control, or, the list could go on and on. But I thought that it might be helpful to share with you just my own process that I have found really helps me, and just some tips and some little tricks and questions that I ask myself to sort of just bring me back, to help me come back to myself, to what I know to be true, to the way that I want to be thinking and operating. I think just as a human, it's just so normal to have so many different feelings and emotions and things that you're dealing with in any given day. And so having ways to help yourself get back to that more regulated, balanced, calm place is just really key. Okay, so here's what I do. When I do feel off or something is going on and I'm working through something, I always start with the question of, okay, what has my food been like lately? What's my movement been like? What's my stress level been like? My hydration and my sleep. I go back to the basics and just take an inventory for myself. How have those things been? Because more often than not, when I do feel some sort of feeling off, I also ask myself about my hormones, where am I at in my cycle? So I check my little app. That's usually actually the first go-to. What's going on with my hormones? Because those are the number one controller I find of any sort of fluctuation, especially emotionally thinking or even mentally. So I do have to reflect, how's my food been? Have I been eating grounding real foods? Have I been eating protein and healthy fat and lots of vegetables? Have I had actual meals? Have I been prioritizing the time to make those? Usually it's pretty good. I have to then check on my movement. Have I been moving my body in a way that it needs right now? So sometimes that means much more low impact and just stretching and foam rolling and, doing Pilates, yoga, a lot more of the mindful movement and walking. Or has my body been needing to move and process energy, move stagnant stuff out, and my body feels ready to do more high intensity? So checking in with that. Is that something I've been needing more? Do I need more high intensity? Do I need to back off a little bit, where it's depleting me? I then also have to check in on my water. get honest with myself. How has it been? All of these things are things that just take tiny adjustments sometimes, or I just forget or get out of the habit, and then I notice it a couple days later. So these are little stopgap questions I have for myself. I then have to get very honest with myself. What is my stress level right now? And I mean this from a perspective of not necessarily in my mind what's my stress level, because I have this tendency, and I don't know if any of you are like this, but in my mind, things are good. I'm like, I got this. I can handle this. No problem. We got this. We'll figure this out. Always solution oriented. How can we think about this creatively? And my mind, usually, I have maybe trained it to go in that direction. But what I really mean for myself is stress level is, what is my body saying? Because I find particularly that my body may be showing signs of stress that my mind never picks up on. I'm like, this is fine. I can handle everything. I've got it. And my body is like, no, we can't. We're giving you all these signs that we can't. We're tired. We're exhausted. We, are not sleeping that great, or you feel anxious, or whatever it may be. So I have to check in on both. I have to check in my mind. How am I doing? How's the life going? General levels of stress. And then what's my body have to say about that? And that may be something that takes some time and some practice to actually figure out, like, signs from your body. But that is something for me that I have to actually check on both. And a good way that I check on that can actually be my sleep. I'm like, how have I been sleeping? Because if my mind is racing and my body is stressed, I probably am not sleeping that great. I start to think, okay, are there any things here that I can do to help this? What could I be doing to help me sleep a little bit better? Maybe it's going to bed earlier. Maybe it's getting off my screens earlier. Maybe it's, making sure that I'm in bed earlier to read instead of, watching a show or something like that. And I usually find in most cases with like a couple of different tweaks that, within 1 to 3 days, I will probably be feeling better just from those things alone. And I think that too is maybe a learned practice, is that knowing that it sometimes takes like 2 to 3 days of doing something consistently before you see the result. And in today's culture, where it's all just about quick fixes and immediate things and what can I do right now without addressing any of the other foundational categories. What can I just do that's a quick solve? It just sometimes takes your body a couple of days. And so giving yourself a lot of grace and being patient with yourself. I'm just going to take extra good care of you, my body. And I think that can really help so much. The second thing I do as I'm doing those things, or if it feels like a bigger thing that I am working through, I make myself journal, because I have found, I know that this has been studied and that there's so many connections between having thoughts in your mind, but writing them down with your hand, like on physical paper with a pen, unlocks something in your subconscious. And a lot of times it's those subconscious thoughts that are keeping ourselves spinning out. Like, we may not even be aware of what those thoughts are, but they're lurking in the background. They're the ones that like wake you up in the middle of the night and then you can't fall asleep because your mind's spinning or ruminating or you're having weird dreams. There's so much, I think, behind the scenes that we never really know what's quite going on until we access what that subconscious voice is saying. So for me, journaling is one of the quickest ways that I can tap into that. And I just start with asking myself a few questions like, how am I feeling right now? What is feeling off? What is bothering me right now? See what comes up. This happened the other day and it made me think of this, and then it made me worry about that. And then you get into writing things out. And when you do, it makes it so much easier to look at that. That's either A, not a big deal, or B, there are things I could probably do about that. So it kind of helps me just get to the root of the thing versus having days and days go by where I'm just ruminating, not sleeping great, just having all these thoughts or feelings about certain things. So it just feels like a little bit more productive as a release. I try my best to journal at least once a week, especially when I feel a little bit stuck or stagnant or kind of in a funk. That's the immediate thing that I try to go to next, is to try and figure out what's actually going on, and then hopefully leading to some answers of what could I start to do about that thing instead of it just sitting there. Okay, another question that I ask myself too is, in 10 years from now, will this thing matter? Whatever I am ruminating on, whatever is happening, 10 years from now, will it matter? Because a lot of times there's so many thoughts or anxieties or things that we're just assuming will go the worst possible way that we actually just have no idea. It could equally go the best possible way, but why doesn't our brain think of that? We just fixate on the negative so often. So elevating yourself a little bit and coming at it from a higher level, like, will this actually matter? Or is this something that is so tiny and small, but for some reason it's consuming me right now? Like, let's take a bigger view of this. Okay, another question. This is something I sometimes will journal about too. How can I make this thing easier, lighter, more fun, or more enjoyable? Let's say I am stressed about something that I'm creating for work, right? And I'm thinking, okay, all the components, and this is how other people do it, and this is, this. I'd say, how can I make this easier, lighter, more fun, more enjoyable? How can I take away the parts that are stressing me out and change it? And a lot of times that could be just a mental shift in how I'm talking about it to myself, or this is actually fun. I love the process instead of just focusing on the end result. Or I love learning and growing and just not knowing everything. It's kind of exciting. It's all how you phrase it sometimes. So that is another question I ask myself so often about so many things. I mean, you can probably see how it even ties in with food. When I'm looking at a recipe or tasting something and I'm out to eat, I think to myself, how can I make this easier, lighter, more fun, more enjoyable, all the good, but without all of like the work or the stress of the toiling behind it. So probably like a good, life question I have for myself. Okay, the next thing I check in, this is like all based on different scenarios. So this is just one of the things that I will maybe ask myself. If I am thinking in that worst case scenario, is that an actual fact? Is it 100% a fact that that thing is true? Or is this just me speculating? Is this just my brain going to the most negative space? And how could I say, but what if it goes well? What if it is amazing? What if it's better than you ever thought? It's so interesting how we always go the worst case. Okay, another thing that helps me is this question, what would the blank version of me do or say? So a lot of times for health, you could say like, what would the healthiest version of me say or do or have or choose here? How would they say things? How would they do things? How would they act? So what would the most empowered version of me say? What would the healthiest version? What would the most balanced version? What would the most calm version of me say? Like whatever it is, the vision that you have for yourself of how you actually want to be and operate in your life, asking yourself that question. I know sometimes a lot of clients will find that question very helpful when they're learning to maybe eat more real foods and incorporate them in their life. And as they're reaching for maybe random snack food in their pantry, like, what would the healthiest version of me do or say or eat or act? What would they do here? What would they choose at a restaurant? What would they order when they're out with their friends? And it's a playful game to see, okay, what was my instinct? And then, but what do I actually want to do? How do I actually want to be thinking? So that can just be another helpful question. Okay, this next question is so interesting. And it's one that I just heard from James Clear, who is the author of Atomic Habits. And I just love this question. It says, if someone took over my life tomorrow, what's the first thing that they would change? Boom, right? You probably can all think of something that immediately comes to mind. So then that begs the question of why am I not changing that now, or what's holding me back from that? So just some fun questions, shake things up, help you get out of a funk, help you change your perspective, your mindset, your attitude on things. Also remind you sometimes it's not so serious. So sometimes we just create these things in our head that feel like mountains. And then also paired with how am I doing on taking care of myself? How is my health? When you take care of yourself in all of those ways that are basic, that are foundational, that are, by the way, very simple when you do them, everything else gets easier, truly. And so sometimes we need that reminder as well of if we're not doing that, things oftentimes feel harder, feel more anxious. You feel like you are in a funk a little bit more or can't quite pull yourself out of things. I hope that that is helpful to hear. A, that Yes, it happens for everybody, every single person. And B, that there can be little tiny things that you can do or ask to just shake yourself out of that and start looking towards the future and having a vision of how you want it to be, or what is the future that you're wanting to create versus the mentality of just letting whatever happen to you and whatever ways your brain wants to go in that negative space, letting that just ride versus, again, having a little bit more of a say in how you feel and operate and think and act. So I hope that was helpful. Let me know if you have any questions about this, or if you have any other of your own questions to add. I would love to know what they are. You can share them with me on Instagram. I hope you guys are having a great week, and thank you so much. If you enjoyed this episode and want more like it, make sure you're subscribed to the Simply Real Life podcast wherever you listen to podcasts, and maybe share it with a friend or two. That would mean the world.